Hello and welcome to the Nico G Art and Comics web show. Today we're sitting down with Andrew Russell Birkett, a comic writer and board game creator. Andrew's got a lot of experience and advice on running successful Kickstarters, and we're so glad to have him on this episode. Let's get to it. So, just a general introduction. Where are you from? How old are you? Name?
My name is Andrew Russell Birkett. I live from Orlando, Florida. I'm 25.
Nice. I think you're like at least the third person from Florida we've had on so far.
Really?
Yeah, lots of comics being made out of Florida apparently.
Nothing better to do.
So what was the first comic you remember reading?
I honestly don't know that I have good enough memory for that. I read comics a little bit when I was younger, but honestly, I kind of didn't really get into comics until like about a year ago. I got into them a lot more. When I was younger, I wrote like short stories and that sort of stuff, and I always liked writing and I loved reading, but I don't like remember any particular comic that was like, oh, I've read this, now I'm gonna get into them kind of thing.
Okay, well, how about what got you like more modernly into comics then? What was like the big kind of inciting book for that?
So it was partially my friend Andre Ficino. He has a comic book series called Simon Says that just got picked up by Image. So I read his other stuff, and then he did that on Kickstarter, and I was like, I've done a lot of Kickstarter projects for board games, and I was like, oh, comics are a thing. So I started buying a lot more other comics, so Mouse and
Not just crowdfunded stuff?
Mostly crowdfunding stuff, and then I found Breaklands, which is on Amazon as like a free thing, and I really like the writer Justin Jordan, so then I started reading all of his other stuff, and started one of my friends owns Source Point Press, so I started reading their stuff. Franklin and Ghost by Garrett Gunn was one that I read and really liked, and then just kind of went from there and realized I could spend so much money on comics in addition to board games.
Imagine if you'd been doing it for longer. Even more money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I used to play like Magic the Gathering and that kind of stuff too. I never really bought the cards like crazy because it's so much money, but I did spend a decent amount of money on that.
So then what's your favorite comic?
One of my recent favorites, I liked the Luther Strode novels by Justin Jordan. So The Strange Talon, and then he has The Legend and Legacy.
Yeah, man. Tradmore's art kicks ass, eh?
Yeah, his art is incredible for sure.
Yeah, I've seen some of his work in person, and it's just his line weights vary so much. And apparently, he does it without like any rulers or anything. Like it's just all freehand brush and ink. Apparently, it's just unbelievable.
It's I obviously, like I said, I'm a writer. I cannot draw anything. My stick figures, the legs are probably not even like that's how bad at drawing I am. So anytime I see artists like that, it just kind of baffles me that someone could do that.
For sure. Do you have a favorite artist out there?
I have a few, so I definitely loved his artwork. And I like Nick Torres, who did Franklin and Ghost. I like the art style for that a lot. Jesse Lee did the artwork for my friend Andre's book, Simon Says, and it's like a Nazi punching kind of comic, and I liked the art style and kind of the whole look and feel of that. So those are kind of some of my favorites. I also like there's a artist creator like that does the writing and creative side of a comic called The Middle Age. Steve Connolly. He was local enough that I found it at one of the local conventions, and I thought it was super, super well done. So I like to highlight indie creators when possible too.
Awesome, us too. How about a favorite writer?
So Justin Jordan definitely is the one that I've been like buying all of his stuff recently. So there's that. I liked Scotty Young, and I liked Warren Ellis stuff with Transmetropolitan. I have seen some allegations of stuff against him, so I'm not so sure about his character, but the writing was good.
Yeah, for sure.
John Lee's, I liked Sync and all the stuff that came from that. And then there's a few like smaller creators that I liked. Joshua Saxon did this comic called Milky. I think he just did the third one on Kickstarter, but it's like a 4-part series, and it's super well written, interesting. So I like that one. Then I like Frank Gogol, Dead End Kids. I started reading that series recently. And then Caleb Thursat, he did a comic called Nook, and all of his stuff is like hardcover, nice, pretty books. So then he did this one, Alter Life, too, that I read today that I liked. So those are kind of my favorites. I like to support a lot of Kickstarter and indie people, so I read more of that than mainstream stuff.
Yeah, the market's growing way faster than the mainstream market too. So there's that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of growth there. There's so much material, so many projects too. It's hard to keep up. There's just so many.
It's impossible.
Yeah, for sure. What's more unforgivable, a good story with bad art or a bad story with good art?
See, I'm sure, and I've listened to the other ones, and all the writers are always going to be like, "Oh, the story matters so much." I don't know that either's forgivable, but I think obviously being a visual medium, if I'm writing a book, the story matters a lot. When I'm writing the comic book, I try to lend the panels to, be as visual as possible and just add text when it's absolutely needed. So the art is probably more important for a comic book, even being a writer. But I think an aside to that is if it's unreadable because the lettering's terrible, that's almost worse for me if I can't read it at all.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think another thing with the bad story good art is that there's a lot of renowned artists out there that also write that will tell you that art's more important. So I don't know. So I guess you weren't really like a Marvel or DC head growing up. Do you have a preference now?
I like Marvel stuff, but I don't know that I care about either one of them. I like Image and the kind of lesser creator-owned companies and the big two, but
yeah, for sure. Did you hear what's happening at DC right now?
yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff. I had seen it with all their distribution stuff with Diamond, and it's like, ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy. They just got rid of DC Direct now too. So you figure like they got rid of Diamond, but then they also got rid of their own distribution service. So I'm not sure what they're doing.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
They laid off a lot of people.
Yeah,
so a massive shift is happening.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder where Bob Harris is going to go. Who will have him? So what projects do you have coming up or in the works?
So I have a few things. Like I said, I make board games, so some of my projects are board game related. But my next like comic book stuff, I wrote a series called Sam Scams, which is about an alien who likes to smoke a lot of pot and go and steal money from elderly people in the villages. So there's that. And so I finished the first issue and I'm putting that on Kickstarter soon. And the second issue I just had edited and I'm sending to the artist. And then I'm doing an anthology that I'm trying to get creators to work on. That's like Florida man related stories. So I'm trying to title it like Fact or Fiction, Florida Manthology, and doing like some of them based on true headlines and some of them more fictional, but trying to like skirt the line where readers are like, is this a real story or not? Until the end, and then reveal kind of which ones are based on true stories.
That sounds really neat. So the going back to the first one, that book is the first issue you said is done, like colored, ready to go.
Yeah. Nice. So the first issue's been done for too long. I didn't want to do the Kickstarter until I had some of the subsequent issues ready, because I want to release them pretty quick succession. So the second one, like I said, is getting artwork, and then the third one, I'm writing it right now. So
is it an ongoing series, or does it have like a finite kind of conclusion?
Right now, it's just been ongoing. ridiculous. So it really could go forever. Honestly, I probably could write in that universe.
Nice.
For,
What's the hardest part of the creative process for you?
honestly, for comics, it's just been finding good artists. I've worked with a lot of artists for the board game stuff and whatnot, but I'm not mega rich yet. Probably never will be, but so it's hard to be able to afford the right artists, and like we've talked about, obviously, comic requires a amalgamation of good story and good art, and I know that I could write the best story in the world if the art's terrible. One, I'm never gonna sell it because art sells anything pretty much. um, and two, when people try to read it, they're going to be like, this is terrible, whether the story is good or not. So I am definitely having difficulty with that, trying to create as many projects as I can and make sure that I can get the right artists on board to make sure that it's like a super professional production.
Nice. Where do you look for when you like what websites or where do you go to when you're looking for an artist?
I have always used for most of my stuff Behance. Just look up there,
Okay.
creative portfolios on there. I'm in more like Facebook groups and stuff for artists in comic books. So I found some people through some of the Facebook like art groups.
Nice. Um, so what do you find the easiest part of the creative process?
So I definitely find like storytelling to be the easiest part. I definitely think that it's not hard for me to make the storyline and have an idea of what I want to do with stories and make it something that's interesting that I think people would want to read. So I think that's probably the easiest part of like crafting the story, even though am definitely one of the weird type of writers that I have zero idea where my story is going when I start, and then I just kind of write, and I'm like, oh, naturally it goes here. That's how I write for novels too, and then the story ends up like no one would get this twist. I didn't even know this was happening.
That's some like Faulkner stuff, like as I lay dying, stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I know people who work like that for like the 24-hour comics and stuff like that, but it's funny that that's your just a general approach.
And yeah, it seems to always be my approach. That I started writing the third issue of Sam Scams, and I was like a few pages in, I'm like, oh, I guess this is where this is going. And it was like totally left field. That doesn't fit with the other ones as much, but he wears these human suits, so I was like, oh, scamming old people. He's gonna be a woman in this issue. So totally switches over.
I imagine that approach to just kind of taking it as is as you go is a lot different than what it would take to make a board game Kickstarter. Like I assume your mechanics, everything has to be nailed down well before you even start pitching that.
Yeah, so for board games, it's tough. I'll develop the game for a year before it ever hits Kickstarter at least, and then I have all the artwork and everything done, and the game sent to reviewers, and I've worked with the manufacturer to get pre-production copies. Like, the kind of good thing for me getting into comics now is manufacturing wise, it's way easier than a board game. There's so much more complexities with having to deal with Chinese manufacturing, and different components and weird stuff. Like I want these little wooden things to look like this. Versus comic books, like I want you to print it on paper, preferably with cardstock.
Yeah, for sure. What was your most successful board game campaign then?
So the last one was most successful in a lot of ways. We had by far the most number of backers, so we had like 800 something backers. It's called Ruins of Mars, so it's designed by a local designer, Don Riddle. So I signed that one. I didn't design that one myself. But yeah, we did the Kickstarter for that, and we raised just over 20 grand. But with the pledge manager, we did like 30,000.
Nice. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
What advice
Right.
would you give to someone who's just starting out, like on Kickstarter, like if they've never done campaigns before? Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is just establishing an audience, and reaching out to people who've done it before. So if you've built an audience and found you want to get like 30% of your funding goal, preferably in the first like 48 hours. So if you're gonna try to get 10 grand, I try to get 3,000 within the first day. I try even for the 24-hour mark. So if you don't think you have the audience to do that, then it's probably not the right time to launch. You probably want to build up your audience a little bit more. And I would say that you want to start talking about your Kickstarter and let people know it's coming out a few months beforehand. But then I think it's also important, especially with comics, because I see it a lot more with comics than with board games. People don't try to build community at all. I've seen so many creators are just like, here's a link to my Kickstarter. Like anyone's going to give a shit. They won't. Unless they know you, they're not going to care, or unless the book looks incredible. But for the most part, what's going to happen is they're going to see your link, they're going to just scroll right by it, and they're going to forget about it. If you build a community and you're in the groups and talking to people and interacting with other creators, creators also buy comics, and you can typically get some of them to support you if you are part of that community and you meet people and whatnot. So I think building up that community is really important instead of just like blindly sharing links in groups like people do.
Yeah. So you've been given the opportunity to work with any IP you wish. What do you choose and what do you do with it?
So I probably wouldn't choose any normal IP, because why? So I probably would do something like Dexter or a TV show that I liked and try to adapt it to be a comic book, just because there's certain storylines that I think could be cool within intellectual properties like that could be revisited in the comic book format. But yeah, I don't know that. Maybe also a few novels that I liked, like Brandon Sanderson's novels. I think Way of Kings would be a cool comic book. I know he just made a board game for some of his stuff, and but yeah, I think I would use intellectual properties that have never been comics before.
Cool. That's a different sort of answer. Usually people just gravitate towards like like the superhero property that they've always wanted to work with. I guess it's a different approach coming from you.
Yeah, I don't really care as much about superheroes. I'll read the comic books, but I don't care about creating them as much. I definitely feel like the thing that I like writing about is serial killers, so that's why Dexter would be like right up there for me.
Okay.
I definitely like the like horror kind of genre, murder mystery kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I never really cared for what everyone else is doing. I definitely always am like, oh, this is my path, and it's very far from everyone else's. It's completely different.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks very much for sitting down with us today. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
Absolutely.
And thanks again, man. Have a great day. Andrew, thanks again for sitting down with us for the interview. Sorry it's taken so long to get the episode up. Deadlines are a son of a bitch. A bit of shopkeeping. The show will be going to a bi-weekly format from here on out. I think it's going to be best for the art, for my art and the web show. I was burning the candles at both ends there, and my work has always got to come first. In 2 weeks' time, we'll be sitting down with Jonathan Thompson, a great writer. We'll be talking about his book, Tale from the Dead Astronaut, and it's going to be a blast. So come back again and like and subscribe. Thanks.